Welcome to LEED AP Credential Maintenance, a discussion for professionals and firms. My name is Tristan Roberts. I'm the editor of LEEDuser, a website designed to help you earn certification on your LEED project. This free webinar is also being sponsored by the Green Building Certification Institute. For more information on GBCI, please go to gbci.org. And for more information on LEEDuser, please visit leeduser.com. You can subscribe to our free email newsletter, which will inform you about future webinars and other tips to help you keep updated on LEED at the URL that's shown on your screen, leeduser/mailchimp/subscribe. That's leeduser.com/mailchimp/subscribe. It's on your screen. Again, my name is Tristan Roberts. I'm joined today by Arnold Key, Continuing Education Manager for GBCI, and Mara Baum, AIA of Anshin and Allen. And we're going to start with a short presentation from Arnold, and then another short presentation from Mara, and then we'll have a lengthy Q&A section with your questions on the LEED AP Credential Maintenance System. So let's get started. Arnold Key is a credentialing continuing education manager for GBCI. He has a long career doing knowledge management for other firms and nonprofits. Arnold, please tell us what you'd like us to know.
Great. Well, thank you, Tristan, and thank you, Mara, for your collaboration up until this point and throughout the preparation for this today. I'm happy, and I speak on behalf of GBCI when I say that working with people who are dedicated to LEED and dedicated to green building in general makes a big difference. So with that, I'm going to give you all a brief presentation of the credential maintenance program, and as Tristan said, we'll have questions at the end. But of course, if there are questions that are not answered during this presentation, I'd be happy to answer as many of those afterward as possible. So with that, what I'm going to talk about is enrollment, CMP Rules and Requirements, finding educational opportunities, reporting CE hours, renewals, and auditing. So the first question, what is enrollment? What I have here is basically the technical definition of enrollment from the perspective of CMP. Enrollment is a one-time process through which LEED APs without specialty can complete credential maintenance or retest to earn one of the new LEED AP with specialty credentials. So there are two ways to enroll. There's an option 1 and an option 2. One option is to enroll through testing. In order to do that, you have to meet the eligibility requirements for the LEED AP exams. You have to take and pass only the specialty part of the exam, though. Complete CMP for LEED APs with specialty. Now, there's a renewal fee, but for those of you who are enrolling through this option, that is, you are a LEED AP without specialty, and you are enrolling to obtain the new specialty, that $50 renewal fee is waived for your first renewal. For option 2, that is to enroll through prescriptive credential maintenance, and I'll explain a little bit more about what prescriptive means later. But if you enroll through this option, you agree to CMP requirements and sign the disciplinary policy. You complete prescriptive credential maintenance for only the first reporting period, which is 2 years, and the $50 fee for those people who choose this option is also waived for the first renewal. So now let's talk a little bit more about the rules and requirements. What you see here is a grid that's meant to explain the requirements that you would have based upon the pathway that you take to obtaining that credential. So on the far left, we have the 2-year reporting period, which applies to everyone who's seeking or who obtains the credential. So then at the top, the next column over, we have LEED APs with specialty. For all of you, there's a 30-hour total that you have to complete. Now, if you are enrolling through prescriptive credential maintenance, then you have 24 hours that have to be prescriptive, and again, I'll explain that a little bit later. 6 of those hours, 6 of the 30, though, are elective or non-prescriptive. But then outside of that, 6 of the 30 hours need to be LEED specific, and we'll define LEED specific as well. Under option 2, or this option here, enroll through testing, you have 6 hours that must be LEED specific, like enrolling through prescriptive credential maintenance, and then 24 of those 30 hours are general green building hours. So now, if you are going to pursue the LEED Green Associate credential, you have 15 hours total. 12 of those 15 hours need to be general green building hours, and 3 of those hours need to be LEED specific. So now, by prescriptive, what we mean by that is that your hours, if you are enrolling through prescriptive credential maintenance, 24 of your hours need to be distributed across these categories that you see on the left-hand side of the table shown. Project site factors, water management, project systems, and energy impacts, and the other categories are the categories to which you must apply these hours. So now, if you are going to be a LEED AP, BD&C, that is, you previously possessed the NC credential, and you are enrolling that credential into the program and become BD&C, that means that your hours must be distributed across these main categories in a way that reflects what you see in that column under BD&C. Likewise, when you go to IDNC and O&M, those are the same. So each of these columns will add up to 24 hours, and once you've completed those 24 hours of prescriptive maintenance, the remaining 6 can be applied to any of these categories. Now, we should say that after your first reporting period, you no longer have to follow prescriptive credential maintenance. The reason why we have this requirement is so that those of you who have not passed an exam can still obtain a new credential without being quote-unquote grandfathered in. Those of you who are familiar with ANSI, ANSI is a standard that recognizes credentials that follow a certain set of criteria, and once they follow them, those credentials are recognized internationally. So given that we are applying for that, we want to make sure that that's possible for you as well, so that your credentials will be recognized internationally. So again, so that's what prescriptive applies to. Underneath, what we're showing are some of the subcategories that fall underneath the major categories, such as project site factors and water management. But what you need to know is that in order to follow prescriptive credential maintenance, you only have to follow the main categories. You do not have to fill in another set of hours underneath all of these other subcategories that you see shown here. So now let's talk about finding educational opportunities. What you see listed in the left-hand column with the colored arrows are the different delivery types or activity types. And then in the columns that go after that, we have a short description of those, the hours that they yield, and the hour limitation for those. For example, professional development and continuing education can be approved by can only be approved by an ERB. So you can only find this activity type or delivery type is the only kind that must be approved by an ERB. But the hours they yield is 1 CE hour for the first hour and 0.5 hours for the next additional half hour. Now, there's no hour limitation for this because it's been approved by an ERB. So then underneath you have live presentations. This is any real-time relevant presentation that's 50 to 90 minutes long. This does not have to be approved by an ERB, but of course it needs to be relevant. The hours yielded are the same, but because it's not approved, there's a 5-hour limitation for this activity type. So then going down underneath that, we have self-study programs. This is any audio, online, or video content that you would study on your own. Now, in introducing this category, this brings up a principle that we are relying on with regard to credential maintenance. That is, we're looking to the professional judgment of those of you who are participating in the program to describe for us why something you're engaged in is relevant. So, we're basing a lot of this off of good faith. We do have an audit plan in place, but of course we can't audit everyone. So that means that we need you to tell us why it's relevant, and hopefully collectively we will define those terms that are in fact relevant for us. We've got other categories: college and university courses, certificates, professional licenses and credentials, community and volunteer work, authorship, and project participation. All of this content we describe in our CMP guide, which is online, and also in the CMP enrollment guide. We also describe a lot of the policies that we're discussing here. So if you want more information, you can go there. But I'm just going to point out a couple of other factors for these other remaining categories. For college and university courses, the difference between courses there and those that would fall under professional development and continuing education is that college and university courses are meant to describe those that are that you take in the pursuit of another degree, whereas those that are professional development and continuing education, those assume that you've already attained your highest degree that desired, and that you're adding on individual courses to that degree. Certificates, professional licenses, and credentials. These are any licenses or any passage of any examination that you feel would add to your knowledge of green building. And so we have a list of potential licenses in our guide online, but it's not meant to be exhaustive. Committee and volunteer work really is any unpaid effort that supports the LEED system, which is self-explanatory, but by the same token, we know that some of you are engaged in efforts that may seem, that may be altruistic, that may support environmental concerns, but if they do not add to your knowledge of LEED or of green building as it relates to LEED, then we can't give you credit for learning whatever you might have learned in that effort. Authorship is self-explanatory. We award hours both for articles and for books. And project participation, that's basically any work on a registered or a certified project. Some people have thought in the past that it was only certified projects, but that's not true. It's any registered or certified project. Now let's talk briefly about reporting CE hours. What you see here now on the screen is the first page of the tool that we have online for you to report your hours. You see the main categories there on the left. And you see here, this is a reporting summary for someone who possesses the LEED BD and C credential. On the second page, what you see here is the page where you actually go into describing what it is that you've done, the activity date, the subcategories, and the like. Now, in the near future, we're going to have an announcement about something that will make this process a little easier. I can't go into detail now, but stay tuned for something that we're going to announce. But it's here where you tell us why whatever it is that you've engaged in is relevant to your credential. Here, talking about renewals and auditing, there are basically only a few buttons here, or a few points to point out here. One is that the renewal process will launch on or before summer of 2010. We're working on it now, but we just want to give ourselves into that time to make sure that we have it all together before we release it. And I did mention earlier about the $50 renewal fee that will be waived for LEED APs to enroll within their CMP enrollment window. And lastly, we just want to mention that we'll be auditing 5 to 7% of all the hours submitted. And so that's the end of my short presentation here, and I'll hand it back over to Tristan.
Thank you, Arnold. And now we'll be hearing from Mara Baum. Mara is an architect and a LEED AP. She's the designer and sustainability coordinator at Anshin and Allen Architects in San Francisco, where she focuses on institutional projects in the healthcare and academic sectors. She's done a lot of research on the LEED Credential Maintenance Program, and she's going to share some of her findings with us right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Arnold, for having me here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fuzzy side of this. The questions that I most often get are, why do we want to join, to opt in to this new system? And if we do, how do we manage it? And most specifically, how do we deal with the continuing education requirements, which is perhaps the biggest change between the former LEED AP system and the new LEED AP with specialty system. And the bottom line is we want to opt in order to get the new credential without retesting. If we don't opt in, we always keep our current LEED AP title. That doesn't go away. That's not going to disappear. But if we don't opt in the next year and a half or so, it's through fall 2011, then we don't have the opportunity to get a new credential, LEED AP plus BDC or something like that, without testing. So if we wait and don't opt in now, we would have to retest later in order to get this new title. More specifically, people are asking, why should I opt in today? What's in it for me right now? And the things that I'm hearing out on the street are that people are interested in getting this new title right away, which you do as soon as you opt in order to differentiate yourself or differentiate your firm, to kind of be that leader in this new system. In a few cases, I'm hearing that there are RFP requirements for the new LEED AP plus specialty title. This may be especially true for one of the, for things that aren't the new construction or building design and construction title, because the others are a little bit more specialized. And then finally, I hear that some people are opting into the new system in order to make use of specific continuing education opportunities. This was the case with me. I opted in a week before I was going to Greenbuild last year because I knew I wanted to get those hours that I was going to achieve at Greenbuild. Now, a lot of these folks are handling it in a guinea pig sort of fashion. So in a firm where there are more than one LEED AP, then you might have just one person opting in the beginning to test out the new system. Now, the next question is, why should I opt in by fall 2011? And of course, the real answer is, why should I opt in closer to fall 2011? And the real answer for this is to kind of let the dust settle and figure out how things go. Maybe it's not important to you to be that industry leader and to go ahead and get the new title now. You would rather wait and see how things settle down. You want to learn from those guinea pigs. And you want to see what kinds of special ERB-approved continuing education opportunities come up later. These are being filled out constantly. They're coming new ones online all the time. And then there's kind of another category of people who may have a less certain work future, who aren't sure if they're going to stay in the green building profession, whether or not the LEED AP is a title that they want to maintain over time. So you can wait to make that decision until fall 2011. And then, there will most definitely be some people who choose not to keep up with that title and to just keep the old LEED AP because it's not as relevant to their work anymore. From the firm side, there are several different approaches. This is in parallel with the professional side. There are firms that are taking strong leadership positions where they're strongly encouraging their LEED APs to opt in, and then they're offering expanded continuing education services to the employees in the firm that help to cater directly to the LEED AP CMP, Credential Maintenance Program. In a few cases, especially with the larger firms, we're starting to see them becoming education providers themselves, such that internal courses they offer fall into that professional development category. That's the category where you have unlimited number of hours. But there are not as many of these types of firms yet. I think there will be more of them. Most firms these days are still trying to figure out exactly what it all means for them. And from the kind of a firm policy standpoint, that means that opting in is voluntary for employees. They may try to get some of their more aggressive employees to opt in order to, guinea pig the system for the rest of the folks. But for the most part, opting in is voluntary, and they're just maintaining their current continuing education program without tailoring it just yet for GBCI requirements. My sense is that most folks right now, most firms are falling into this category, but of those, a number of them intend to be in the leader category. They're just not there yet. So I'm going to go through a couple of sets of examples on how to get some of these hours, these 30 hours every 2 years. It's not a small number, and especially for those of us who already have continuing education requirements associated with licensure as architects or interior designers, etc. This is the list of methods that you can accrue hours that Arnold suggested earlier. And this is the set that I expect most people will probably tap to get their hours. Now, you'll have the opportunity to kind of fill out as many as you can in the live presentations and other categories here. Live presentations is, of course, the way most of us are already used to getting a lot of our hours, not all of them, but a lot of them. And it's going to be a little bit of a challenge that there is a limit of 5 hours for those courses that are not approved, those live presentations that are not approved by an ERB. And so we'll, I'm sure, start to look to some of these other categories to fill in those gaps. So these are just two examples here of different combinations of types of study that you might do in order to fill out the 30 hours over the 2 years. The side on the left, that's me. I'm, doing several different things. And in my case, because this is actually work that I would be doing anyway, it's really not all that difficult to fulfill the continuing education requirements. I think a lot of people will have to try a little bit harder. They may not necessarily be doing this continuing education on their own anyway. So the list on the right is just a different set of hours, a different example of what kind of a typical LEED AP might do, at least a typical LEED AP who's working at the time on a LEED project. Or when I say at the time, I mean at some point during that 2-year cycle. If you're working on specifically on LEED credits during that time, you can count that work. And so I'm going to go through just a quick couple of examples to give you ideas of some of the more vague categories, what you might be able to do. In terms of self-study, you can do things like putting your Netflix subscription to work with movies that are related to green building, like Blue Vinyl. There are free podcasts you can download from iTunes online. There's also a number of videos that Greenbuild offers at these 2 sites here. And as Arnold said, I think it's just really important to emphasize that, especially with self-study, although it's true with this whole program, it's important to use your best judgment. Think about what is relevant for LEED and you as a green building professional, and also how to fit all of these things within the prescriptive requirements, at least for the first 2 years. For committee and volunteer work, there are a number of different options. Anything that you're doing specifically with your local USGBC or local USGBC chapter, or at the national level, either GBCI or the USGBC counts. That might include things like reviewing green build proposals or actually reviewing education proposals from education providers through the USGBC. Both of those are through the USGBC. For LEED project participation, you don't necessarily have to be that one person who goes in and fills out the documentation, fills out the credit requirements for LEED Online, as long as you're engaged in some way and working on a LEED credit. So maybe your project team might host a LEED credit charrette to bring in a number of people to talk about a credit at once, to learn about it at one time. You can also volunteer on a LEED project, maybe for Habitat for Humanity or other nonprofits. And as Arnold said, the project just needs to be registered during that 2-year CMP cycle. Then, of course, anything that we can't get in these, perhaps easier categories like self-study or live presentation, we're going to have to fill out using the professional development continuing education hours. So there are really 3 directions you can take with this. The first is to search for courses on the USGBC's website. So they have a course catalog, and it's getting bigger all the time. There is a wide range of kinds of options, things online, things in person. Some are free, some are fairly expensive. There are different ways you can search. The USGBC doesn't really have much control over things like cost and location. These are all individual organizations who have submitted courses. The only thing that the USGBC says is that the content is appropriate for the LEED credential. Everything else is done by the different individual organizations. And in fact, you too can become an educational provider. You might partner with other firms or organizations or do it on your own. And by doing this, you pay a fee to the U.S. Green Building Council. They are right now the only education review board, although that might change in the future. The fee structure is based on whether or not you're a USGBC member, whether or not you're for-profit or not-for-profit. This chart on the right says specifically for USGBC firms that are for-profit, and then it ranks over the number of courses that you would anticipate providing over a 1-year period. And then it's not in this slide, but if you do over 25 courses, there's a flat fee of $3,000. And the structure of the way they review those courses is a little bit differently. If it's 11 or more courses, they do what's called a portfolio program. It's structured a bit differently. It's a bit simpler, at least as you move forward. And then the final way to get these kinds of hours is to attend a conference in which the conference sessions that are specific to green building have been approved for hours. And so you don't have to pay as much attention to going through the website. You'll be able to learn through the conference materials what you can and can't attend. Certainly green build courses or sessions will all apply, and the AIA convention this year is also going to have their green building sessions give you CE hours in this category. So finally, for more information, I've listed all of the major websites that I think you would want to know in order to follow up on these different programs. The first set is for GBCI, and then the second set is for the USGBC Education Provider Network. So with that, I will hand this back to Tristan for Q&A.
Thanks very much, Mara. That's very helpful. So we're going to transition into our Q&A section, which we're hoping to take up the rest of the session with, and we've got quite a few questions that you sent in, so thank you. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible, and we encourage you to follow up with these information sources that are shown on the screen if any of your questions don't get answered during the session. So we're going to start out with one for you, Arnold. There are a couple of questions about LEED for homes. That credential wasn't specifically covered in your slides, but do the same requirements apply there?
All right, so LEED for homes, there are similar requirements with regard to credential maintenance. However, the pathway to obtaining a LEED for homes credential is different than the other commercial specialties. So you cannot enroll in order to obtain a LEED for homes credential. You must pass the exam, and that's because the LEED for homes credential did not exist in the previous version of the credentials. So the NC, CI, and EBOM, those are the credentials that are relevant to the newer commercial specialties, and homes is not on that list.
Okay, thank you. Another question that both of you might be able to speak to: what sort of verification is needed is required to claim a CEU hour for working on a registered LEED project? Right.
So typically, the easiest way for someone to find or to obtain validation is if their name appears within the project in LEED Online. But if you're one of those people, for whatever reason, is in fact working on a project, is getting experiential knowledge out of their work, but don't appear in LEED Online, you can get what we call a letter of attestation. That's written by someone who's supervising your work, and if they just write, the credit that you're working on, when you worked on it and for what project, that will suffice.
Okay. Now, in a LEED, over the course of a LEED project, that might take several years, and the work on the credits may span quite a bit of time as well. How do you match that up with the period in which you need to earn your CEUs?
Right. So, there's an easy answer to this, but it can, admittedly, it yields the chance for additional discussion for how this policy is rendered now. But I will say that in the current construct, policy-wise, it's one CE hour per credit. Now, you just simply, though, have to be working on that credit during the time or during your reporting period. So if you initiated activity before you enrolled or before you obtained the credential, but yet you are continuing that work and you're getting experiential knowledge during your reporting period, you can still count it. It's just that you can only count one credit. You can only give one, like I said, one CE hour per credit. So admittedly, another part of this discussion could involve, the question of whether, if you're spending a lot of time and you feel like you're getting a lot of knowledge out of your work, whether one CE hour is equivalent to the amount of work you've put in. And again, we could explore that for potentially new ways of looking at this policy, but that's how the policy stands now.
Okay, thank you. Question for you, Mara. What if I've been a LEED AP for some time? Can I just continue as a LEED AP, or is that being phased out at some point? What happens if I don't opt in?
Okay, well, this is similar to what I was talking about earlier. The LEED AP is not being phased out. It's not going away, not anytime soon. And in conversations I've had with the USGBC and GBCI both, it sounds like that they will still be able to use the regular LEED AP as opposed to the LEED AP with specialty in order to get that innovation and design point in LEED that gives you a point for having a LEED AP on the team. And as far as I'm aware, they're not anticipating changing that rule anytime soon either. So I think the real question is you would want to balance the pros of having the new title, whatever that they might be for you, with the challenges of having to fulfill this continuing education requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's an audience member who's asking, can you discuss in more detail how to enter information into the CMP templates? She says it's not clear how to do this for items like LEED consulting on projects or USGBC committee work and some other things.
Right. So yes, this is a challenge, and we understand that. There's basically a couple of things to point out here. One is that if you're working in an area where it's not clear, another approach to this is to think about how the experience you're getting can be applied to certain knowledge areas. So let's say if it's skill oriented, like the work that you're engaged in, perhaps you would emphasize certain skills and perhaps not certain concepts. Well, think about the concepts to which you will apply those new skills. That's one approach. Another is that we do have a category called stakeholder involvement or in education. In that subcategory, if you use that, and you can find that listed in our CMP guide, that's one way that captures some of the other difficult fits that people have found. The last thing I will say is that if you decide that you still can't make those things work, hold on to those activities, because again, we're about to make an announcement soon about a way that will make those things fit easier. So you have your 2-year reporting period, and so you have more time to report those hours, and feel free to hold on to those hours until you hear this announcement to see whether it might make that process easier for you.
Okay, thank you. Mara, a question. Can we get credits taking one class and get credits for both AIA CEUs and GBCI CEUs?
Yeah, great question. Again, one of the most frequent things that I hear. So as I'm sure you know at this point, there are requirements within the AIA for a certain number of SD, Sustainable Design hours. And the AIA has said that they will accept any course that's been approved by an ERB for GBCI hours as SD hours. Right now, that doesn't go the other direction, because GBCI needs an ERB to approve hours for continuing education. Now, of course, anything that isn't directly approved by an ERB still may qualify, and probably does qualify if it's an SD hour, but it'll have to go into one of the other categories like self-study or live presentations. In theory, if we wanted to have absolute reciprocity between the two organizations, the AIA would have to be an ERB, an education review body, just the same way the USGBC is. But that we don't anticipate seeing anytime soon. Nonetheless, the AIA is very aware of these requirements, and the Education Committee within the AIA is working to more closely align some of the requirements, and I would anticipate seeing a little bit more alignment in the future, but today it doesn't necessarily work both ways.
Yeah, I can tell you, too, to add to that one of my colleagues at USGBC used to be the Director of Education at AIA, and he, for USGBC, is working with them, as you mentioned, Mara, to try to iron that out. So that is definitely something that is being addressed now. And we do have a sense of urgency because of the fact that there are a lot of architects who have been asking that question. They've asked us directly, and we're not trying to deliberately multiply the number of requirements that architects would have. It's just that in order to add integrity to the credential and add value to the credential, we do have to provide a sense of definition as to what needs to be known in order for that knowledge to count towards the credential, and that's really the difference. AIA's let me put it this way: the standards that AIA has are important to them and make sense for them, but they're a little bit broader than those that are incorporated by LEED and Green Building as defined within our job task analyses that define the credentials.
Okay, thank you both. Now, this is a follow-up on an earlier question. Is there any talk at all within the USGBC or GBCI to ever change the rules and require the LEED AP with specialty be the only way to achieve ID credit for a LEED project, as opposed to having only a LEED AP without specialty even, earn the credit?
Yeah, so
right.
as far as I know, Arnold, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's no intent at this point to change that to require a specialty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think people recognize that they don't want to anger the numbers of LEED APs out there who have possessed the credential. We don't want to devalue that credential in any way. The move to the new credentials was more about responding to our stakeholders to provide differentiation or to allow them to distinguish themselves in terms of their specialties, let's say, as opposed to attempting to devalue the LEED AP without specialty credential.
Okay, well, that's a good segue to the next question, which is sort of a broader question about this whole program. And the question is, what was the motivation to change the format for APs in the first place? It sounds like a money grab that isn't going to go over too well with cash-strapped existing LEED APs. It seems that GBCI is cheapening the credential we all worked so hard to obtain. Any thoughts?
Right. I mean, this is a question that we've heard in other contexts, and people, unfortunately, people have this sense of larger organizations that money is their only motivation. But here, people need to remember that this is a nonprofit organization, and that with nonprofits, they are typically driven either by members or by stakeholders. In some cases, it's both sets. And these decisions were driven by our stakeholders and not by the GBCI Board of Directors, independent of them. So that said, what the concerns were involved the need for people to be able to declare to the marketplace that they are not only aware of green building in a general sense, but that they have a practical specialty in areas that reflect the rating systems. And so that was a main driving force. There were a lot of people who were wondering, what do I actually get if I hire a LEED AP? And so now with these more defined knowledge areas that are listed underneath each credential, people now in the field have a better sense of what people are supposed to know. So that's one key. Another is also to provide another credential for people who do want to stay general, but want to declare that they are keeping up with knowledge as it grows. And so for the green associate who takes on that new credential, they can say, I have a broad understanding of LEED concepts, the LEED reference guides, and the types of practices that are needed in order to move a project to certification. I'm just not necessarily the one who's performing those calculations. So those are two of the primary driving factors in this, and it's not money because GBCI actually does not make any money in and of itself from the continuing education. There is an exam fee. Exam fees do sustain GBCI, but that what we gain from that is put right back into the system within which people who gain these credentials can use them to advance their careers.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on this also because this is something that I'm sure you can imagine comes up all the time. And there's really two basic issues. There's the money and then there's the requirements. In terms of money, GBCI is giving essentially 4 years, 2 cycles worth of, free administration. And then $50 every 2 years is not an unreasonable fee, and in fact, I think is just about one of the lowest in the industry that I'm aware of for any fee that credential that requires ongoing maintenance. And at this point, most credentials do require ongoing maintenance. Certainly, professional licenses do. And I think that that GBCI was responding to a general and fairly overwhelming market-based conversation that was saying that, maybe someone who got that LEED AP 7 years ago and hasn't touched LEED since and hasn't, had any kind of continuing education since really isn't necessarily a solid LEED AP anymore. And so there was an interest in differentiating those people who were current from those people who maybe just passed, what might have been an easy exam 6 or 7 years ago. And this is, this is in the best interest of those people who are doing it and who are current and are continuing with this. And in terms of the cost of education, I think that's perhaps one of the biggest challenges that we all face, especially in these cash-strapped times, as you say, in that it can potentially be very expensive to try to seek out the education requirements. On the other hand, if you're a little bit creative with it, it can be very inexpensive, if not free. there is a lot out there that is available. You just have to, look for it and perhaps be a little bit less picky about what you're interested in. I also anticipate that as, the next couple of years roll around, as our 2-year cycles kind of start to come to their end, we'll see more and more education opportunities, and of those, of course, some of them will be at little or no cost.
Well, thank you both. Great answers. Now, a more practical question. If your hours are audited and deemed non-compliant, do you have a second chance before your credential is revoked?
Yes, and I mentioned this earlier that, given that this is a new program, our intent is not to be draconian in this. We basically are encouraging all of us, collectively to establish the boundaries of knowledge for these credentials. So, if something is clearly irrelevant, and in our conversation or in our analysis of those hours, we're able to deem it as such, people will have a chance for a reply or rebuttal. Hopefully we'll be able to resolve all of those cases. But yes, people will have an opportunity to say, well, I think you're missing these factors here. You should take this into consideration, and we definitely will.
So one of the things that people ask me sometimes is, well, if there are 30 hours required, should I plan for 32, 33? Should I get a little extra in case there's some fluff? And, off the record, of course, I always tell people it never hurts. It's better safe than sorry, but it's a little bit hard, and I think that it won't really be until the audit process starts to actually happen, which of course it hasn't yet, it's too soon, that we'll get a better sense of what's really involved. But it sounds, from talking to Arnold and others at GBCI, it sounds like the approach is fairly reasonable. The challenge that I think some of us are concerned about is if the audit is at the end of our 2-year cycle, and we do determine that we're deficient in an area, then especially if we're trying to, to keep up with these prescriptive requirements, the first cycle is going to be especially difficult. Then, we may be out of time to make up new education. But I guess we'll learn more about that when the time comes.
Right. I think that what will happen is we will be conducting what we call light audits. So we will be initiating that prior to the end of people's cycles, so that we can start to communicate that. So people should expect that they're going to hear from us in at least one or two ways. Either A, if they're flagged for audit, and we start looking at their hours before they hit the renew button, we're going to look for ways to communicate with them to alert them to things that we're concerned about. But also, we want to share with the broader community those things we're learning about patterns of our reporting that would trip them up, so that we don't want to wait. It would be impractical actually for us to wait until all the reporting periods are up, because that would be 500 people at once. As of right now, we have 26,000 LEED professionals who are participating in CMP, and so we simply wouldn't be able to do it if we waited to the last minute for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Now, another question: if someone is doing volunteer work for green communities or for their local USGBC chapter, or serving on a national committee like the LEED Steering Committee, how can they log that in their CMP hours?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
If someone's doing volunteer work in a program like Green Communities, or in their local USGBC chapter, or in the national USGBC, like a LEED Steering Committee, how do they log that?
Right. Okay, so if they're in a committee or they're conducting volunteer work, what they should do is they should be looking at again what they may have learned from that experience and how that experience could apply to another one of the other category areas. And again, this is also it's the committee work and volunteer work for which we've created this additional approach, which again I'm going to have to announce a little bit later, but everyone will get that announcement. Because we recognize how difficult it is for that. What I should also point out, though, is that what's easier in those cases is work on a volunteer project that perhaps includes LEED ideas, but perhaps is not registered. So if you're working on that kind of project, you could count it as volunteer work and just use the concepts that came into play in the building of that structure. Now, one other thing I'll point out is we do recognize that people do have some difficulty going from the terminology that's used in the LEED reference guides and applying it to the categories that are listed underneath certain credentials in the CMP guide. And so for that, we have developed these two documents, which are about to be posted in our CMP toolbox online, gbci.org, which will allow people to translate from one realm to another. I could go into why those terms are different, but for right now, for the sake of this particular question, let's say that we're doing all we can to try to help people in those situations, trying to report those kinds of hours.
Yeah, and I might add that there are really some good resources in that toolkit. The toolkit can be located from the Credential Maintenance Program homepage, which is the very first URL written on the screen right now. And I've already tried to go in and self-report a number of these types of things. And it's tricky. It's not always immediately obvious how you should be doing it and what you should say, especially for things that may not really closely align with the categories and subcategories. And the advice that I give my colleagues is that you have several sentences worth of explanation that you have the opportunity to give to talk about what it is that you did. And so in that space, be sure to give your logic and reasoning for why you put that particular type of education in the category and subcategory that you did, how it relates to you, how it relates to maybe it's a meeting that you participated in, even if it seems like a stretch to assign that particular event to a category or subcategory, see what you can do and write out your thoughts in that space.
Thank you. Now another question, and by the way, we've got time for just a few more questions, so we're going to select the ones that seem to have the broadest interest from the audience. Could you share some details about the LEED AP Fellow Program and what is being planned to qualify for this level of accreditation?
Right. All I can tell you right now is that it's still under development. My colleagues in the test development area have been assigned this task, and I know they're working with committees to work on the requirements. I'm not at liberty really to discuss those because they're trying to work them all out to adjust for weighting certain characteristics that will be asked for in the application process. So I don't want to unnecessarily emphasize any of them. So I do know that they are looking at potentially revealing or unveiling, I should say, what those attributes of the LEED Fellow would be by Greenbuild of this year. Just don't hold me to that because they really want to make sure that this is done right because there's such high demand for it and because the range of potential applicants is so broad that they want to make sure that they've got good representation and that the people that are selected will meet the high standard that's being placed on this new program.
Thank you. Now, a few audience members have questions about the 2-year enrollment period, when that begins for each member, and how do you find that info for yourself?
Yeah, the 2-year enrollment window?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we had to do with this is break up the number of people who received invitations to enroll in 1,500 or chunks of 1,500 people because what we found is that the system that we use is called SizeApp. The system that we use, can crash if we have 10,000 people all trying to access it all at the same time. So people are broken up by last name, and if you go log into My Credentials, each individual's enrollment window is listed in your profile. So that's basically how you find out what it is. But something that people need to know is that each person's enrollment window may be different from the others. We know we started, the first emails went out August 3rd, and so for those people, their last names would have begun with an A. Their enrollment window would start August 3rd, 2010, and then it would end August 2nd, 2012. And so this process rolled through the alphabet all the way down to Z. So that person whose last name is Z, they would their enrollment window would begin October 27th, 2010, and then it ends.
Actually, Arnold, it's 2009 through 2011. I think that's what you meant.
Thank you. That's right. 2009. Thank you. 2009, right, and then to 2011. Sorry. So yeah, but you can get your own precise enrollment window if you go into My Credentials on the GBCI site and look at your profile. It'll tell you when yours is. But thank you. That's right.
And you do that by going just to the GBCI.org homepage, and there's a link that says Log in to My Credentials at the top right of the screen. And once you log in, it will take you to a page that gives you all sorts of options and information about your particular credential or credentials. It's very useful.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have time for two more questions. First question, if I'm working on a military project that is using the LEED system but isn't officially getting LEED certified or using LEED Online, can I get credit for those hours?
That's a difficult question. I think that person should email us so that we can get a better sense of what that project is. The way the policy currently stands, the answer would be no. I think that it would be very useful for us. I'm looking forward to understand the conditions under which that project was created. But someone can still get credit, just not under the project participation category. So you could potentially use the volunteer work or the volunteer category to do it, or if any self-study was engaged in order to prepare for the project, that could be used as well. So one may have to be more creative with how to use those hours, but for the sake of project participation, the precise answer would be no.
Thank you. Now, last question. I have found some continuing education hours that claim to be GBCI approved but are not listed in the course catalog. How can I make sure they are approved?
So I can talk about that a little bit.
Go ahead.
If you.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, neither of us are the USGBC, so you would really want to direct that question to be completely certain. You'd really want to direct that question to them. But I think that not all courses are actually listed in the course catalog, especially if the course is not open to the public. So as an example, if my architecture firm ever became an education provider, we wouldn't necessarily list our courses in the catalog because they would be intended to be specifically for our internal staff. And so there may be other reasons why someone might not want it to be listed in the catalog. And so you would want to ask the USGBC directly to confirm that the course has been approved by an ERB if you would like to get that confirmation.
Okay, thank you, Mara. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask both of our speakers to give any closing remarks they want to add. For now, I just want to say thank you for being here with us today for this webinar. This was a free webinar co-hosted by LEEDuser, which is a LEED resource published by Building Green. You can subscribe to LEEDuser's free email newsletter to get notice of future events like this and to keep updated on LEED and LEED certification. Go to the URL shown on the screen, which is www.leedduser.com/MailChimp/subscribe. And the co-host of this webinar was the Green Building Certification Institute. And personally, I want to say thank you to GBCI for working with us on presenting this information. And now, Arnold Key and Mara Baum, any final remarks?
Okay, well, I'll just go first. Again, I just want to thank you all for working with us. I enjoyed the process. And to those of you who are listening, we do hope you enroll. But what you should know that by enrolling, we intend to do whatever we can to try to help you through this process. We know that the rules are complex for many of you, but you should know that the purpose of that was to try to spread the doors, or to open up as many doors into the process as we could, while at the same time trying to get us all to meet a particular standard. But again, we're going to be looking over time at additional ways of making it easier for you to get your CE hours, whether it's through tools that we provide for you to help monitor monitor the activities in which you're engaging, or to engage other potential partners in providing the education. Now, USGBC is the one who's approving it, but on our side, we have ways of trying to engage those who could help provide additional opportunities. That said, I hope that you'll join in with us and help us continue to shape the industry in a way that corresponds with the GBCI mission.
Thank you, Arnold. Mara?
Thank you. I would really just echo what Arnold says in that the intent with this possibly confusing and complicated credential maintenance program is really to move everyone forward, is to move the industry forward and move the concept of the LEED AP forward. And it definitely, I can almost guarantee you, it definitely will feel frustrating at moments, and it definitely will feel confusing at moments. But as all of these details are ironed out, I think it ultimately will be for the betterment of the profession. And so we may just have to be a little patient with it as this all works itself out. On that note, there are organizations like LEEDuser who are committed to providing as much information as possible on these kinds of topics. And one thing that wasn't mentioned at this point yet is that we conducted a first webinar about a month and a half ago specifically on the credential maintenance program, explaining all of the ins and outs of what it means to get your continuing education hours. And this is available on a recording at the LEEDuser website. If you go to just leeduser.com and search for webinar, I'm sure you could find it. But you can download the slides from that and listen to the recording itself if you're specifically interested in more information on the credential maintenance program itself, as opposed to the more broad context of information that we've talked about here. So with that, thank you for listening, and I'll hand this back to Tristan.
Thank you, Mara Baum, and thank you, Arnold Key. The recorded webinar that Mara mentioned is accessible from the LEEDuser homepage at leeduser.com. My name is Tristan Roberts, and this has been a free webinar from LEEDuser and GBCI. Thank you very much.